Oh, just to bring it onto the table. Okay.
Discussion. Please call the roll on the motion to reconsider.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donchez.
Aye.
7-0, motion passes.
Chair will accept the motion, a second to add to the agenda, Resolution 11I, Certificate of Appropriateness for 425-429 North New Street for the Cameron Museum project. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. DiGiacinto moves, second.
I'll second.
Dolan seconds. Is there discussion? Call the roll on the motion. Next time.
Next time, okay, we'll get there. Sorry.
Please call the roll on the motion.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donchez.
Aye.
7-0, passes.
I ask the clerk to read Resolution 11I. Right after that.
Resolution 11I, Certificate of Appropriateness under the provisions of the Act of the Pennsylvania Legislature and Bethlehem Ordinance, whereas it is proposed to build a two-story addition at the rear of 425 to 429 North New Street. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that a certificate of appropriateness is granted for the proposal. Resolution 11I is sponsored by David DiGiacinto and Eric Evans.
Ms. Dolan.
I just wanted to first to thank the Cameron Museum, to thank Historic Bethlehem Partnership, particularly Charlene Donchez Mowers, for spending 3 long hours with me, and I know there were other city council members who also spent a lot of time. Indeed, before that, there was information that we didn't have, and that's nobody's fault really but our own. We should have come and actually seen the camera, and it's one of, I think there's something to be learned from this, because in this case in particular, if you looked at the plans, and we even had to agree on this when we met, that there was something about the Photoshop job that had been done, that had the original camera and then the addition that has a rounded crown that created an illusion, even after I was told several times that the building was not round, that made the building look like it jutted out. And once Ms. Donchez Mowers walked me out and showed me the footprint of the building, it was sort of a shock, but a good shock to see that it really only comes out of the U shape of the camera a couple of feet on each side. The addition is very tucked in to the existing building. So the only really straight-on view that you would ever get that would be significant would be from the parking lot. And that matters too, because people do walk back there. But it was also very comforting to see that the HARB had such an influence on the final decision-making processes, and this is where HARBs are so important. The HARB originally said it was too monolithic, and that final version, which was not the version that was circulating around the historic support community or attack community, depending on their mood, on the internet, which was a very old version of the plans. The new rain screen material, the color is a beautiful background for the garden, and it's also cut and designed in such a way that it doesn't mimic the camera, but it reflects it, it enhances it. And as I told Mrs. Donchez Mowers, I love modern architecture, so I would never just be against something because it's modern. In fact, I think what they've come up with is going to be ultimately considered quite beautiful. And for those who might find it a little jarring or different at first, I was also very pleased to hear that a professional landscape architect will be retained by the Historic Bethlehem Partnership to further enhance the blending of the new building with the old. So I think this, in the long run, will be remembered as not only an incredible resource for our historic collection, but also as a daring and interesting and beautiful addition. So I apologize for my ignorance, and if I learned anything, I learned that on these unusual circumstances where the HARB approves, and yet the community is not necessarily in such agreement, that I should hear from both sides. So hopefully it won't take 3 hours next time, but I do appreciate your time in educating me more clearly on the benefits and potential beauty of this building.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please call the roll on resolution 11I.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Before I get into the next item on the agenda, members of council did receive 3 memorandums from Solicitor Spadoni that we might be willing to take a look at. I'll be working from that document right now. The Chair will accept the motion and a second to decide on the course of action regarding the matter of residential treatment facility at 111 Dewberry Avenue as noted in Communication 7B from Attorney Spadoni that was read in the record this evening. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Mr. DiGiacinto moves. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Mrs. Polinsky seconds. Discussion?
This is just to choose one of the 3 courses of action, to discuss one of the 3 courses of action.
Right now, I believe, Mr. Spadoni, this is just to get it onto the floor.
Correct.
Yeah. Any discussion? Please call the roll on the motion.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. Chair will accept the motion and a second to add the resolution for consideration.
So moved.
Mr. DiGiacinto moves.
I'll second.
Mrs. Polinsky seconds. Discussion?
Which of the 2 resolutions is being offered? I mean, it's not really a discussion, it's just a procedural question.
Before we have a roll call on the motion, we can look at the memorandum of Mr. Spadoni, and there's basically 3 proposals. Look at the memorandum. 1, intervention in the zoning appeal as pending, intervention in the zoning appeal after the zoning board hearing decision, and to not participate and take no action. We do have a motion in a second, so we can have discussion on which option council might favor. Correct, Mrs. Spadoni? Discussion?
Absolutely confused. This one is to have the solicitor enter his appearances and intervene. And this one is to enter our objection to it.
Mrs. Spadoni?
If I could.
Go right ahead.
I was alerted to this yesterday, on Sunday at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and sent this memo this morning as a result of my appearance at the zoning hearing board meeting. And I think there was a memo last week that I was to appear and present a letter that was signed by individual council members, which was done. As I indicated in the memo, part of that discussion early on in the zoning hearing board meeting was that Mr. Marles, who is the attorney representing Penn Venture Capital, called Mr. DiGiacinto as a witness as a cross-examination, and his testimony was taken. As a result of that, I prepared 2 resolutions, and the first one, which is the second page of your packet, which is the shorter one, is for intervention at the current time with the zoning hearing board and to object to the proposal of the residential treatment facility. The second resolution, and this is only as a result of our crack city clerk, Steve Koff, that was a resolution that was prepared by me, and there were resolutions, and that was largely tracked after the Barnesdale. If you recall, many years ago, there was a barn at the intersection of Linden Street and Barnesdale Road. And council passed a resolution to object to that to the zoning hearing board, and just sent that objection to the zoning hearing board. So I prepared that resolution as well, basically for discussion purposes for council. But as I indicated, you can do one of 3 things. You can intervene now, You can intervene after the decision, which frankly I think is somewhat problematic because that would not give counsel the opportunity to present testimony and witnesses, or you may decide not to do anything.
Ms. Dolan?
So, another question. What is, I mean, I know that we did what you're proposing in the second resolution. We have done that. We have done that in the past. Most recently, I think, with the Elias Market. A vote was already taken and we objected, but we also asked you to serve as counsel. So would that happen under, would passing resolution number 2 also mean that you would join, if there was some sort of a citizens group that came forward, you would join as counsel with that group?
This resolution would authorize me to enter my appearance, to intervene in the appeal, and to present testimony and documents as I would see fit to object to the special exception application. Now, whether there's other people, I presume that may be in concert with Mr. Leeson, who represents the Diocese of Allentown, Bethlehem Catholic High School and such, but this is to object to the special exception application, authorizing me to intervene and to do what I would perceive to be necessary to foster that position.
So either one of these, if the special, if this start immediately, we would join, we would become a party as representing the city council.
Correct.
And then in resolution 2, if the special exception is granted, we would become a party, and we would become a party along with the Diocese of Allentown and Bethlehem Catholic.
I think what I need to say is resolutions are mutually exclusive. If you adopt to intervene, then I think the last resolution is useless. Because it just says you object to it, you send that to the zoning hearing board.
Okay.
You could do that. Or you could have the first resolution, which is to intervene and participate.
Well, if there's not a motion made, if there wasn't a motion in second, so there's separate questions, we're not really discussing that, correct?
Correct. I mean,
But I'm done with questions. Those are procedural questions.
any other comments from council?
So, Mr. Dantes, if we vote aye, we're objecting to this treatment center being located by Bethel Catholic.
Well, what we need,
Or-
Mrs. Dolinsky, we do have a motion and a second on the resolution for consideration. We're under discussion right now, but we really need to be specific, correct, Mr. Spadoni? Which option, is it option 1, 2, or 3, that city council want to move forward on? Do we want to intervene immediately? Do we want to intervene after the decision of the zoning board? Or do we just then basically take no action and not participate at all? So we really need to be specific based on Solicitor Spadoni's memorandum. Mr. Evans?
The action on
I would then, if it's appropriate this time, I would like to make the motion that we intervene immediately, which would be option number 1.
I would second that.
So, discussion?
I think that those in favor may wish to discuss first, and I have something to say, but I'd rather hear your side first.
Mr. Evans? Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, President Sanchez. This goes back to the first zoning hearing board meeting that occurred with regard to this case. I was at that board meeting, which lasted about 5 hours. Councilman Reynolds was there, Councilman DeCento was there. And at that time, it became quite apparent quite quickly as 5 hours can be, that this was clearly not appropriate for the development in the area that we're talking about, and for the many reasons that have already been mentioned tonight. Soon after that, I did talk to President Sanchez about putting a letter together, and after the next council meeting, drafted a letter through the city clerk I felt we should put out in support of the residents. Councilman DeCento at that time added that we signed it as individuals at that time, and 5 of us supported it from there. From there, it went to the zoning hearing board meeting, where it met with some opposition from the appealant panel. And during that time, we asked for continuance, but we were told, or Attorney Spadoni was told that there's no need for appeal, that this would be continuing through Monday night. and on to which is now the next November 29th meeting. I think during the time that the number of us did sign on to it as individuals, it became clear to at least a number of us that maybe that wasn't strong enough and that we need to take the next step, and that's kind of where we are at the point right now. You look at the zoning summary, this goes back by, I pointed this even when we had our zoning hearing was it last week or the week before, as we're looking at a new zoning ordinance, that this is from the department that zoning is primarily intended to protect existing residential neighborhoods from incompatible development, and I think that's exactly what we have here. It's a serious case of what is very incompatible for a number of reasons, which were stated at the zoning hearing board that clearly show that this does not meet what's needed for special exception. So I think it's time that we do step in. I think that we show the leadership that's been asked for us in the position that we've been elected to do, which is represent the citizens. If it's something that you disagree with or anyone wants to disagree, I think we can explain to them at that time. But if it's something that we agree with, that this should not be done, when you go to the zoning hearing board, both meeting number 1 and meeting number 2, the developer clearly has abundant resources and he's employing them, and the residents have asked us to deploy the resources we have as a city. And I know the mayor and the administration put together a letter opposing it, and I think a number of people on council clearly oppose what's going on to it. We don't think it's in the best for our city. We don't think it's a clear, safe situation. I happened to be over there this afternoon for a football game, and it continued to amaze me as I stood there. There are hundreds of kids on the fields, using the football field, using all the fields out back, and it's, we're talking 300 feet. It's not something that's maybe on the peripheral or something around the corner, a mile down the road. The kids are out there, and it's in clear vision. It's clearly too close. It's clearly out of line with what belongs in there. There are a number of options. Number 1, for a development of this nature, and number 2, what can be developed with what is already there. That it's not a clear fit. And I think as elected officials, we should stand up, support the citizens, support our city, and intervene in this pending process. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'll just add that, as Mr. Evans mentioned, that both, the 3 of us, Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Evans, and I, spent time. I know at the first 2 hearings, I listened to all the testimony. Got a chance to speak myself last night, surprisingly, and was supportive of the letter that was written and was presented last night, and obviously rejected as not being in standing for this particular hearing. It is true, I mean, we do weigh in on the zoning ordinance. We create the zoning ordinance, we vote for it. And albeit this was created many years ago, this particular ordinance, we're still responsible for it as city council people. I did hear a couple times last night from the attorney representing the client looking for the special exception, as well as one of the key witnesses, that city council passed this ordinance, again, many years ago. But that again reinforced my feeling that city council is responsible for the ordinance and its appeal. And I do believe after hearing the testimony from many of the citizens, I didn't hear too many people in about the 8 to 9 hours that I spent listening to this, too many people in favor. In fact, I maybe heard one sort of make an economic issue over it in the 2 sessions. So I don't think it's an appropriate fit for the neighborhood, and I don't think it does anything to improve that particular neighborhood. So I feel strongly and did sponsor the first option on immediate intervention on this program.
Thank you. Let me just say, as one that signed the letter and one that favors the action that's on the table to get involved immediately, I just don't believe it really meets the criteria for a special exception. I believe the project is just a wrong project for this location. I don't believe it's a substantial improvement to the property or the immediate vicinity is one of the key points for this special exception. I believe it would hurt the property values of the properties surrounding that complex. I just don't believe it fits in with the character of the neighborhood. And I think the zoning laws are really designed, very importantly, to protect neighborhoods, and I certainly don't believe that that it fits in with the character of that neighborhood. And I am concerned about the fact that it's just too close to a school, whether it would be Bethlehem Catholic or Liberty or Freedom, whatever, just too close to a school, and also the fact that there's other public public parking in close proximity to it too. So I have great reservations about it, and I did sign a letter. I will support the councilors to get involved in this immediately. Stella?
Just right off, I want to respectfully address this councilman who just spoke. First of all, the issue of resources, that we have the resources, and it's true, we have some resources, but we always have to think very hard about using our resources. And I felt very good about using our resources this way when we stood with the citizens of near Elias Market, who had been involved in a zoning hearing board experience that was clearly, I felt, unfair. And I also felt that they were living in an environment that where they were being, where their health and safety was being impinged upon. It was so clear they were having to breathe the exhaust fumes of multiple trucks in an area that was supposed to be, when they moved in, they thought they were going to be living next to a farmer's market. So they weren't expecting it to be, a 4-bay truck depot. And then there's the concept of leadership. Leadership is, as I understand it, not doing necessarily what a group of people tell you they want you to do. You are supposed to use all of your ethical resources. You're supposed to research. You're supposed to lead. And sometimes that means, quite frankly, not going with the group, not going with the majority. As far as this use being incompatible or appropriate, it's a residential treatment center. It's people who need help, who have voluntarily gone to seek help, specifically in a residential environment. And then I believe strongly in the need to look at what's actually statistically true as opposed to what can inflame our emotions. So I know that the most dangerous thing that I did today was drive here. I'm aware of that. That's probably the most dangerous thing we all do on a regular basis. And if we drove on Route 22, we were really taking our lives in our hands. And if we drove our children, we were really putting them at great risk. And that's truth. And that's statistically true. And when I hear about how putting this facility next to a football field, and I know that statistically, football is a sport that the risks that you take as a football player are enormous. And I witnessed a student of mine nearly die, 2 years in a rehab center, son of a very beloved worker here, nearly die in a football game, and certainly lose a tremendous amount of his teenage life. And so I know that football is dangerous, but yet I choose to attend the games and to cheer. I know driving is dangerous, but I choose to drive, and I drove my kids. But I don't allow myself, I try not to allow myself to get inflamed about things that I know, because I've researched, are not actually dangerous. They are the darkness, they are the strangers, and that in reality, strangers are rarely the ones who pose danger to us. The darkness is really not statistically more dangerous than the light. I had similar experiences to Mr. Intalix when I was living in Douglas College my sophomore year. Right next to Corwin Y, the last house in my block of houses, was a halfway house. Douglas College allowed a halfway house, lived right next door, except that was a halfway house for people who had committed not felonies, but they had anger management problems. And they were there before they would be, they were in jail, and this was their halfway place. They were so careful, so concerned about the way people would think about them, that if you did see them, they were, as Mr. Intalix observed, unfailingly polite and helpful. Experience number 2, I was a teacher for 11 years at Nichman Middle School. And I learned there that teachers can have serious issues, in the case of a fellow teacher with alcohol, drinking on the job, eventually convinced by loved ones and co-workers that she needed help, went to a voluntary center. And I learned that principals can have serious issues with illegal drugs. And when they realize that these issues are overwhelming their lives and they seek help, I think our community is safer. I would rather see those people who need help in a center getting help, getting rehab, than teaching in our schools and being the principals of our schools. Or, as I learned at Liberty High School, although I began my education at Nichman, as many young people begin their experiences with drugs in middle school, but I really learned about drugs much more so at Liberty High School, the drug scene now, not the drug scene of my childhood. But I learned not only from observation, but from extensive teacher in-services. I learned what percentages of high school students drink and do drugs, what drugs they are using, and where they get them from. And we would get these in-services on a fairly regular basis. And in short, the average drug-using student, who, by the way, is not an average in any other way except for the average drug-using student. They come from the honors courses, they come from the basic skills courses. They are from every aspect. They are Catholic. They go to Catholic schools, they go to public schools, they are Jews, they are Muslims, they are Protestants. No one is immune, no young person, no adult is immune if they have a tendency toward addiction, a disease, addiction. So where do they get their drugs? Well, they get them from their friends. Where are they most likely to do drugs the first time? They're most likely to do them in their basement or in the basement of a friend. And the parents know these friends, and the teachers know these friends, because they're all in the same class. And then you move up friend, and then there's some friend who's got a little bit more guts, and he's the one who deals with the lower level drug dealer, but he himself is the drug dealer, and he's operating in the school. And that's every school. And there isn't anyone who's going to tell a Liberty High School teacher that there are any schools in Bethlehem where drug use and drug abuse is not a problem. So the third thing in my life that informs me tonight, besides research, I moved to Bethlehem 27 years ago. And after living in a number of cities, my dad was in the Air Force, we moved around a lot, I like to travel. This was the best city I had ever visited or ever lived in. And what made it so great, I mean, my own city that I grew up in was truly just as beautiful. It was on the Delaware River and very similar, steel factory across the river, but still incredibly historical. But this city was better, and I tried to figure out why. Well, I think part of it inspired by the spirit of the Moravians. It's a spiritual city, Bethlehem. We have spiritual places. Our concept of history is largely based on religion and on spiritual matters. And so as a result, this is a compassionate city. The first house I owned was on Pawnee Street and was only a block away from New Bethany Ministries. A beautiful building. And I thought it was just a wonderful thing. I'm right there, but a block away from a residential area, across the street. New Bethany's Ministries is across the street from that fancy bed and breakfast. I can't remember the name of it. There's something. The Sayre Mansion. Pretty nice place, right across the street from New Bethany Ministries. And I believe that right next door to the Sayre Mansion is a new expansion of the New Bethany Ministries. So, only in Bethlehem, I would think, only in Bethlehem. Anywhere else, there would be people coming out in NIMBY fashion saying, this is going to bring down my property values, we can't have those people living here, but not in Bethlehem. My first experience with community service was with Turning Point, and my most recent new experience with service is being a member of this council. And this council, these men and these women, we are known I'm so proud to say we are known throughout the valley as the most civil council in the entire Lehigh Valley. We disagree, but we are never, ever unkind to one another. There's never any yelling. No one insults anyone, only in Bethlehem. So then I asked myself, why would citizens of a city like this, a city with compassion and civility in its DNA, why would they fight an industry that does not have any record of even minor notice, any record? The drug and alcohol rehabilitation industry, the residential treatment centers, have no record of having any negative impact or any